Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and on today's video, a bit of a public service announcement, or basically trying to work out who is the Coolmoon PA1 ARGB PWM Hub actually for. Now this has been one of those hubs which is selling by absolute bucket loads over on Amazon.co.uk and various other sites around the world. And also if you want to get one, you want to get a bit cheaper, but don't mind waiting, then Coolmoon have an absolute ton of stuff over on AliExpress, and no doubt you'll find them on eBay and other places. Now the hub itself looks like this. If you've seen this in adverts and you've seen it posted somewhere, it has RGB across the actual hub itself. It also has RGB ports, PWM ports, etc, etc. But essentially this is what it looks like. So if you see one similar to this, but it's from a different brand, chances are it's exactly the same one, it's just some other company is selling it and using their brand. It's a very common thing to happen. And in fact, I'll put some links on the screen at the moment so you can see the one I bought comes up with a completely different company name. But this is essentially the Coolmoon PA1 ARGB controller, and it comes with a remote control. So this is actually really useful. So this kind of comes down to who it is actually for. So if you've got a motherboard, say a slightly older, maybe B450 or an older Intel board that does not have any addressable RGB ports on it, you can use this hub and actually control your addressable RGB fans. Maybe you've got a case with some kind of LEDs in it. You can use it to control all of that via the remote control. If on the other hand, you do actually have a motherboard which has an addressable RGB signal, you can actually put it into this system and then you can bypass through it. So there is a button on here called MB, and this is basically for motherboard control. So when you press it, it toggles between the two cycles. So one cycle is going to be the motherboard controlling the PWM signal and also the addressable RGB lighting, in which case the Coolmoon PA1 is acting literally as a distribution box. So it's taking in the 5V addressable RGB signal from your motherboard. It's also taking in the PWM 4-pin signal from your motherboard as well. And it is then distributing it across the 8 fans and up to 10 addressable RGB devices. So that is the one mode, so that is in the motherboard control mode. If, on the other hand, you want to use it in the other way, so you don't have fan headers or you don't have the addressable RGB ports on your motherboard, you can press the button and then it'll go into standalone mode. So in this mode, you can basically go through using the buttons here, changing the lighting styles, changing the fan speeds. Now the fan speeds, I will say straight away, they're not perfect. So there's 4 levels, one of which is off, so kind of technically 3. So there's a low speed, medium speed and a high speed. And those also can be a little bit inconsistent depending on the fans you're using and also the motherboard. So let's go through what is actually included in the kit, and then I can explain why it doesn't work in some instances and why it will in others. And actually before we do that, let's take a quick look at the box. So if you've seen this as well, this might be what you're seeing. So PA1, PWM and ARGB controller. Does have the option for hub synchronization. You've also got remote control, as it says there. And it's compatible, it says Aura Sync. That's kind of not really telling the whole story, but at the top here it tells you what motherboards and what brands it's compatible with. Essentially anything which has a 5V addressable RGB header on it, be it Gigabyte, MSI, ASUS, etc, etc, you can use it with that. And of course if you've got a case that has a built-in controller but you want to expand the system, you can use it in that instance as well. On the back it tells you more about the versions. There's 4 different versions of this that I'm actually aware of. There's a black version, a white version, and both of those versions also come with an option with a musical sensor as well, so you can actually have your music controlling your lighting style. So that is the box packaging. It actually comes with relatively good documentation as well, so it tells you what you should expect to see actually in the kit. It also tells you what all of the buttons do on the remote control there, and also gives you a layout of how the wiring works, but don't worry, we're going to go through that next. So when it comes to the wiring, there are 3 main wires which come with the actual kit itself. So we'll break these down. So the first one is going to be probably the most important one, and that is how to actually power the darn thing. So it is SATA powered, which is always a nice thing to see. And on the end there is a red connector. Now the red connector, they've color coded it so you can't go too far wrong. There is a red header on here, or red port on here. So literally you can just plug that in, plug that into the SATA power coming from your power supply, and basically that is how the whole unit is powered. This takes some of the strain off the motherboard rather than daisy chaining components to motherboard ports. So that is essentially what the hub is intended to do. So other connections, there is the 4-pin PWM, of which only 2 of the cables are actually required because power and the ground actually come from the unit itself. So there's a little white 2-pin plug there. On the hub itself, you've got various ports all laid around. So we'll start actually on this side, and I'll show you where the other one plugs in shortly. So there is actually a red port there, which you can notice there, which is a PWM style header. So that is where it actually senses the speed of your fans. Now I often get asked this as well. Can you use different types of fans? Well, yes, you can do, as long as they're all 4-pin PWM. Obviously, if they're different shapes, different sizes, different manufacturers, they're all going to have very different PWM rates. So one fan may be at 200 RPM at 10%, another may be at 400 RPM. So there is going to be some things that aren't going to work particularly well together. So high performance fans and low performance fans aren't going to sync particularly well. But if you're using all the same fans, you should find it pretty consistent. Also, next to each fan, there is an addressable RGB pins, so male pins there, the 3-pin which we're used to seeing. So yeah, you can kind of wire those however you want to. I will stress, you must have a fan connected to PWM port 1 for any form of speed control whatsoever. Otherwise, it just won't read a signal. So do make sure you use that one first. On the end there, so this is where the fan port is. It's labeled up FP. And also there's an additional 2 addressable RGB outputs, so you can use those for LED strips, that kind of stuff. On the other side, same stuff again, so we've got the other 4 PWM ports and 4 addressable RGB ports. So that's making up our 8 PWM ports and 8 ARGB for fans. And on the other end, where we've plugged in the power already, there's also an option, so you can connect up your case reset switch. So if you've got a case which has got a reset switch or a separate RGB switch, which is one of those normal 2-pin ones, you can just plug it into here and you can use the button on your case to cycle through the lighting styles. That for some people may be preferential rather than having a remote control. Choice is entirely up to you. You can use both at the same time, it's absolutely fine. The next one on the side there's a little 3-pin connection there. So that is going to be for the addressable RGB. So back to the PWM cable. So again, it's only a 2-pin. They've done it quite well on here so that physically pins will only fit in one particular socket. So there shouldn't be any issues with plugging in the wrong parts. So with the addressable RGB, 3-pin, 5-volt addressable RGB, the normal standard, which we're so used to seeing. It's also got the pass-through, the VDG, which is often used on some older gigabyte motherboards. And that cable ends up in this 3-pin one, which again only fits in one specific place, which is on this end, so next to the power plug. And we just go ahead and plug that in there. And that is effectively it. When it comes to actually mounting the hub into a computer, now unfortunately it doesn't have any sticky tape on it, but it does have a rather large magnet on it. So this is designed really to be put inside either on the bottom of your case or on the back, maybe behind your motherboard if there's a suitable area there. Of course, if you want to, you can just take that magnet off or put some double-sided tape on there should you wish to. Even a bit of blue tack would be fine. It isn't particularly heavy. It is quite chunky though. So in terms of height, I'll put the measurements on the screen here so you can see the exact measurements, but it has got a little bit of bulk to it, especially because we've got the addressable RGB lighting actually on the top as well. So yeah, do bear that in mind. I'll put the sizes on the screen like I said, so just make sure that if you're planning to put it into the back of your case, maybe you're going to put it kind of where the CD-ROM trays normally would be in a case, that kind of area, just make sure you've got enough depth there so you can actually get your panel back on and not actually crush this thing. Ideally, put it into one of the CD-ROM or hard drive bays, which are at the bottom of your case. You can slip it in there very easily, or just put it on the bottom. It is magnetic, so it isn't going to go very far. Now, a good question which has just been raised by Kath is, if it goes into the back of your case, why has it got RGB? And as most of you out there that are into RGB or like RGB, there is never a reason for RGB. It doesn't have to have a reason, it just has to have it. It's one of those things, so it doesn't make any difference. Obviously, if you want to put it on display somewhere, then you can do, but with all the wires sticking out, it's probably going to look pretty gross, but the choice is there for those RGB lovers out there. Anyway, with all that said, I'm going to grab a power supply and a fan now, and we'll go through and I'll show you what it looks like, and I'll go through the lighting style so you can see if there's a built-in lighting style which suits your needs for those that don't have motherboard control. Okay, so as you can see, we've got this unit powered up, and now you can see the addressable RGB, which is on the absolutely pointless RGB controller part, which you're never going to see, but maybe you want to, I don't know. And I should demonstrate as well that the back is magnetic. I know I've said it already, but just to prove a point, there you go, it's attached to a ruler there, so you can see what that is all about. So yeah, there you go. It is very simple and straightforward. And also I've wired it up here deliberately with contrasting wires so you can see what is going on here. So we've got our fan plugged into port 1, which is the red port. And just to show you that it doesn't matter which one of the addressable RGB ports you plug it into, I've deliberately plugged it into one which is further away. So you don't have to kind of have them all jumbled up together. You can wire it pretty much as you want to. Just make sure you do have a fan actually onto port 1, otherwise it won't be able to read any PWM signal. Now actually on my MSI motherboard, which is currently behind us in the PC, when plugging this in, I actually get an MSI sensor to read the RPMs. The RPMs do read very unusually, so don't be too concerned. It still will control the fans to some extent, but not as well as you'd expect. So I set my usual fan curve, like 20% at 20 degrees, 40% at 40 degrees, 60% at 60 degrees, and then 100% at 70. And it seemed to follow it quite nicely when it was in motherboard control mode. When it comes to actually controlling it as a standalone, as we've got it now, the fan speeds are slightly erratic. And if you have got the PWM plug, which is this one here, actually connected to your motherboard as well, it does seem to do something very strange. So it seems to really compress the RPM ranges. So if you have this connected to your motherboard, but you're in standalone mode, it will reduce it so that the fan will only do somewhere between 40 and 50% of its full RPM range. So quite loud on low and actually not very powerful on medium. But if you're using it as standalone, it's not too bad. So this is currently in the off position. So if we press the speed button once, we go onto the first speed, which is kind of absolutely fine. That's actually a reasonable amount of airflow, so for most people this is going to be absolutely fine for keeping your PC cool. If this isn't enough, you can press it again, and it ramps things up a little bit. There is a very odd where it ramps up a lot, then kind of tailors down or tapers down a little bit. So that's on the medium speed. Moving quite a bit of air now, you can possibly hear it as well. And if we go to full blast, these fans are actually not particularly high RPM, so it's not the best way of showing you this, but this is on full now, and that is it, so it won't go any faster. That is essentially it. So it's actually, for what it needs to do, it's absolutely fine. Just make sure that if you are using it in its kind of standalone modes, that you don't connect the PWM header, otherwise you will get some slightly bizarre results. If you're using it in motherboard mode and you're using this purely as a hub to distribute the signal to more fans, then obviously you do need to connect it, in which case you won't be going into motherboard mode, or you won't be going into standalone mode with the remote control. So just to show you what happens if you go into motherboard mode and there's nothing connected, it basically stays the same, the RPM stays the same, and if we press the buttons now to actually try and change the fan speed, it won't, because it's looking for signal from this cable. So hopefully that makes some sense. Obviously we've got no lighting either, because it's also looking for a signal coming into this 3-pin 5-volt addressable RGB. So let's go back into standalone mode, and I'll turn the fan down. Actually turn it off, that's probably easier. So let's take a look at some of the lighting modes. So of course you can go into your statics, so you've got your red, your green, your blue, your yellow, slightly warmer yellow, orange, deeper orange, blue, light blue, purple, green, or mint I suppose that would be, and then you've got your pure white. So you can do any of those static colours should you wish to, and also you've got modes as well. So if you go through the modes, you've got all the various RGB cycling modes. So you've got like the feel one, that's kind of nice. There's actually quite a few modes on here that can be used, again depending what your preferences are. Chances are you're going to find something which you like on there. Obviously it's got the unicorn puke in here as well, which no doubt we'll be coming to very shortly, and combinations of fills and colours. It's actually quite a good range of addressable lighting styles on there. I'm not too sure exactly how many are, it doesn't say on there, but I'm guessing it's somewhere in the region of about 60 different lighting styles. So you've got traditional fades through various colours. Yeah, so it's kind of nice. You've got some slightly more psychedelic stuff going on there, and these actual fans are quite good. They show the light through on various sides as well, which is kind of nice, and through the back. So yeah, you've got quite a few options there, and you have got the more traditional rainbow puke there if you want to use that, color chases, etc. And also you've got the one where the RGB goes the opposite way around as well. So yeah, that's all pretty cool. So other buttons on the remote control, so you've got the option for brightness as well, so you can reduce the brightness. Hopefully that's coming through on camera. It's probably not because it's actually quite bright in here, and the lighting is actually quite bright anyway. Mode buttons you can cycle up through. There is a magic cycle button. It doesn't do anything particularly magic, but it will go through the available options. And you can also get it to pause the lighting as well. So yeah, if you find a lighting style or a particular look that you like, you can press the button and it will pause onto it, which yeah, some people might prefer that look. I don't know, down to the individual, I guess. And of course you've got the on-off button, so if you don't want the lighting on, you can turn it off. And the fans, if they're spinning or taking a signal from the motherboard, they will still keep on going. It's just a way of turning the lights off, so if you're going to bed or something and your PC's left on, you can just quickly switch off your lights so it doesn't distract you whilst you're sleeping. For those of you that are wondering, the Coolmoon controller takes a CR2032 battery. Quite easy to do. There's a little catch on the back there so you can remove that, so if the battery goes flat, very easy to replace. You can pick those up very cheaply on Amazon as well. Price wise, we haven't discussed that at the moment. So price wise, if you're buying this from Amazon, you're buying it on like a Prime deal and you're going to get it for kind of next day or 2-day delivery or whatever, probably looking around about £17 for this. I think I paid somewhere around £17–18. If you want to go for the slightly longer haul version, you can get it where it comes through in maybe a couple of weeks time, around about £13 I've found them for. Or alternatively, if you go on to something like AliExpress, you can pick them up for generally in the region of about £10. But then obviously you are going to be waiting considerably more and potentially could get hit for customs. And with that, you really never quite know where you stand. It's a little bit of hit and miss. Certainly, if you need it quickly, I would say Amazon's your best bet. And also that way you can try it out, and if it isn't any good or it doesn't do exactly what you want it to, you have got up to 30 days to return items when you buy them from Amazon, which is quite handy. In terms of the range, I have been kind of aiming at this and doing stuff, but even with the remote control kind of way out of the shot, it does work absolutely fine. So yeah, you don't necessarily need, if I do that behind me, it doesn't need line of sight because my fat guts are in the way. So that seems to be doing exactly what it needs to. So anyway, I've waffled on for way too long. Obviously, this controller isn't perfect for everyone, and it's a shame that you can't split functions. So it'd be nice to be able to have motherboard control for the addressable RGB, and then PWM control standalone, and maybe vice versa. For those people that obviously don't have addressable RGB on your motherboards, you are going to have to use the built-in PWM profiles in the unit rather than being able to pass through from your motherboard, which is a little bit unfortunate. For those people, I would probably suggest maybe getting this and then a separate PWM hub for your fans, just so you can have that kind of granular control that we're all used to. I'll put some links for those also in the video description. There's some pretty good ones from Deepcool, which we've used a few times. But I think this is mostly for people that don't have addressable RGB and do want to take advantage of that remote control to actually get some lighting into their fans and potentially case and other peripherals. So that pretty much wraps up the Coolmoon PA1. If you've got any comments or questions, you know what to do, stick them in the comments section below. Better still, if you want a quick answer, and maybe if it's slightly more complicated, head over to our Discord chat and put your question in one of the tech support rooms, and we'll try and help you out as best we can. Probably going to be doing a video with this actual control unit in a case coming up very soon. So again, if you want to see how this works out, do hit subscribe and the chime notification, and you'll be notified of future video releases. I think that's it. I've been Mike. This is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and hopefully we'll catch you in the very next video. Thanks for watching.